We're here today to remember the beauty and the wonder of a very dear friend of ours who was the head of our organisation, Dadi Janki. Mm-hmm. All of us are long-term yogis of over 30 to 40 years, and today we just wanted to share some stories with you. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves.
Thanks for inviting me to share my recollections of Dadi Janki. I first met or encountered Dadi Janki in London in 1982, and I was on my way from Australia to Ireland to visit my family. And I used to go to London every year, and I'd visit her twice, as well as seeing her in Australia when she travelled here and toured, and also encountering her in India. And so over nearly a 40-year period, I saw, experienced, and felt the influence of Dadi personally in my life, and it was quite formative in terms of looking backwards. And there's a number of things, I suppose, from a personal point of view that really stand out to me. You know, her spiritual direction influenced me probably in three ways. One was that I was amazed by her energy, and the energy of her eyes particularly. And when I first met her, we used to sit on the floor, and so you'd be sitting quite close to her. And I found that the energy of her eyes, what they call in the Brahma Kumaris, her drishti, was a curious mixture of warm and cool. And I'd never encountered this experience of this sort of exchange of energy.
Niall, what do you mean by cool?
Yeah, it was an energizing experience where I felt the energy of her personality sort of would inhabit you in a very, very strong way. You'd feel energized by her energy, and not feel not feel out of yourself, but very much it used to enhance my understanding, my spiritual practice. So that was the first type of experience that was new to me. I had never experienced this before, and it was singularly unique every time that I met her. And the other thing about her, which I really enjoyed, was her understanding of the theology of the Brahma Kumaris was quite extraordinary. This was a woman, a personality that thought very, very deeply about what God meant to her in her personal life. And I was very affected by that, because I had come from a Christian tradition where God was a fearful sort of entity to encounter. And I felt that through my experience with Dadi Janki over many, many years, I came to encounter, for the first time, I think, the God of love. And that sustained much of my inquiry, and very much the influence of how she thought. Her intellect, her mind used to fascinate me, because she could captivate you for in terms of her speaking, her delivery, her eloquence, for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, which is quite amazing. And so that was the basis, I think, of my own spiritual development, Dadi's influence, and the main sort of doctrine or tenets of the Brahma Kumaris, which I came to understand and accept. And the third thing that really, I suppose, is something we consider in the modern world is her leadership style. And one of the things I came to understand about Dadi over a 40-year period is that when you knew her or got to know her personally, whatever she would ask you to do, I always felt, looking through her eyes, that this person had done it herself in her own life. Yeah. So there was a great sense of integrity and wanting to do what she asked you to do, because you just knew that this person was genuinely had trodden that path, had taken those steps of change and transformation. So I was, like many, many, many thousands of Western people all over the world, deeply influenced by her example. She toured and travelled throughout Australia on many occasions, and I had an opportunity to see her up close and personal in that sense. And the other thing that I remember about her is that she always remained a student. And throughout the days as she got older and busier, I would always see her late at night reading the classes that would inspire her either from that morning or for the next day. So she was a great example of somebody who was authentic and who integrated high personal and spiritual and moral values. So in that sense, I felt quite lucky. I was very affected by my encounters, my transformations, and I think everything that she gave me personally remains resonant and alive in my life until this day, in a sense. So I'm very happy to speak of my respect and my fortune of having met such a person. You know, I would never have imagined as a young boy growing up in Ireland that I would encounter this lady from Hyderabad, Sindh, and in a sense have somebody have a unique and a special spiritual effect on my life. And I'm very, very grateful to her. And I will miss her, and I hope that the next part of her journey, whatever that may be, is auspicious and powerful.
That really resonates with me, Niall. You know, this idea of these beautiful young women in Hyderabad taking the spiritual journey, and then me hearing about it all the way in Australia. Because I remember when I was 19 years old, I heard about these amazing women in India who were transforming the world through meditation and developing, you know, a personal value system. So I really wanted to go and check them out and see who are these women. So off I trotted to India at 19 years old on my own. And when I first walked in the gates, I remember seeing Dadi Prakashmani first, and then later on seeing Dadi Janki. And I was astounded by them. Even though my own mother is a very beautiful, knowledgeable person that I loved very much, these women were like her, but just from a whole other different world. And the knowledge of soul and the knowledge of God and the knowledge of developing a personal power within yourself was just so fascinating to me. And Dadi Janki was, there's the two words in Hindi, what are they? Zeal and enthusiasm.
Umang Utsa.
Umang Utsa. That was Dadi totally. She was Umang Utsa. And there's so many stories I could relate, but I remember one particular story I felt turned me from a sort of immature young woman into a more mature, spiritually aware person. I was living in a meditation center with someone, and I was having some personal difficulties with the person. We were finding it very difficult to get on. And I decided that I was going to be myself and try to just live my life according to the way I felt I needed to. And if you like, I could say they were more conservative, and I was a little bit more on the sort of freer style, yogi style way. And that person that I was living with was very upset. And so Daddy called me to see her because she wanted to help solve the problem. And, you know, I was like 24 and, you know, not really good at listening, I'd say, at that stage of my development. And I was saying to her, Daddy, but this person, it's not my fault. She's doing this and that and the other, and she's crying and whatever. And Daddy was trying to reason with me, to get me to see where I could sort of change my, you know, thinking about the situation. And then I was going, Daddy, but it's not my fault. It's this person's responsibility to look after themselves, to take care of their own problems. I can't fix their problems for them. And she just went very silent and looked me deeply in the eyes and said, or asked the question, but can you be compassionate? And in that moment, it just felt so deeply in my mind that, yes, I can do that. And I stopped the kind of protecting myself, and I stopped the defense mechanisms of trying to not I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. And I went into this feeling of, yes, I can have compassion, because I started to think of the other person and why they may be feeling like that. I maybe thought about their history a little more, and I thought, I don't have to be so defensive and protective of myself. I can be giving in that situation. And from that moment on, I started to realize that all of us have a history and a story, and all of us are sometimes defensive. And compassion melts defensiveness, because you're starting to look at the world through someone else's eyes. And that's what Daddy did for me. She started me on that deep journey of reflection.
She was and is and continues to be a very, very special being. And even though Daddy has left us in the physical realm, I still feel her very close. And I've always felt very close to her. And there was sort of like, even though she was in a senior role and she was quite important, and I was fairly young and from a different culture, I never felt that sort of any separation with her. Daddy always had this way of making you feel that you belonged. She could be pretty sort of corrective, and that little finger would wag, and her eyes could be very, very, very powerful, as Niall was saying. That her eyes would look right into you, and I've experienced that many, many times with her looking right into me, and she could read you, and she'd wag her little finger at me and maybe say to me, "You need to learn self-respect," and it would kind of rattle the whole being, and I've never forgotten the look on her face and her little finger and her words, because they went straight into my soul, and I've continued to work on some of the advice that she gave me personally. But as an artist, I always felt that she understood the artists, and had a deep respect and a curiosity for the creative energy, and that it was always a great comfort to me, because I always felt I could be myself with her. And I suppose part of it was she had this childlike energy about her. She was, even at 104, she was still a child. She could still play games, or she was always a little bit naughty, a bit cheeky. And so she loved when she came to Australia, or even in Mudabun, in the headquarters in Mount Abu, when we did creative little concerts, all sorts of things that we call cultural programs or something like that. She loved it, and she always got involved in it. And I remember once she came here, and we had a huge program. There were thousands of people came to this big program, and we called it The Missing Piece. PEACE, and there are a few people in the program, and about 17 musicians, and I was playing this kind of mythological character, and I remember being on the stage, and she got up out of her chair and she grabbed my hands like this and started dancing, and in that moment there was just the two of us. Everybody seemed to just disappear, and she held me in this space, which she could often do with many of us, but in that moment it was me as an artist and her as an artist combined in this bubble of energy, and it was beautiful and life-changing in some way, and also affirmative as an artist, that there was a place for it in the spiritual journey. And I had, as an actor and participating in some of the programs with her, I always felt that she understood and she loved the creative energy. So that was quite wonderful for me. But also she was, as Niall was saying, a great student, a great spiritual student. And I found her determination right till her last breath, almost to understand and know and to share all of that with whoever crossed her path. and she didn't look at what role you played in this life, but who you were. You could be the king of some country, or a Maharaja, or whatever. You could be anybody, or the one of the Sevadaris. She would always see who you are, not what you are. And she was almost like an archaeologist of the soul, and she loved to excavate the treasures and blow off the old dust and find the jewel that lay behind each person, but also behind the cryptic secrets that God imparted. She would really, really want to know and understand, and then she'd want you to know and understand. And she would delight in the victories when she realised that you actually got it.
Yeah.
But I do think that she transformed me a lot through her eyes. I remember once her pulling me really close, and she put her forehead straight against my forehead, and she looked straight into my eyes with this piercing gaze, and this light seemed to come from her soul straight into my soul. And it was a personal experience that is transformative, and that power in her ignited the power in me that I felt anything was possible. I can transcend anything, because her determination made me more determined. Her curiosity made me more curious, and she wouldn't kind of give too much energy and time to excuses or the weakness of it. And you kind of want to go, but Daddy, don't you understand why I feel like this, or what the trouble I'm having with this? She'd dismiss it really quickly. She wouldn't give it too much energy.
Yeah.
She'd just kind of move on really quickly from that kind of weak excuses or a vision on the self that was less. And she would propel you forward into a personal power and possibilities of what, and almost like giving you a vision of yourself in a higher self, higher self, the wiser self, the more ignited being of light.
So true, Chrissy.
I'll never forget those experiences, and I'm really, really grateful to her for making me feel like she was my friend, and believing in me and seeing in me what I couldn't see in myself. And I'll never forget that, and she'll always, always be with me. And I loved her dearly, and always will, and I still feel her presence powering in this world, but on a much, much bigger scale now. On an unlimited scale, I feel her really powering in this world and playing her role as a magnificent sort of angel. Mm-hmm. She's really taken on this powerful angel form, and helping the world transform into all that it can possibly be in its highest, most beautiful form. So many, many blessings to her eternally. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dadi Janki. I've been trying to think of one particular story, but she had such a continuous, penetrating influence on my life. It's hard to think of one thing. I mean, I really felt she was my friend, my teacher, my grandmother, my sister. These relationships were very alive, which is kind of amazing in a way, because we spoke different verbal languages. We were from different cultures. I grew up in a Greek neighbourhood in Melbourne, Australia. She grew up in Hyderabad, Sindh. I mean, our formative years were incredibly diverse, very different to each other. But the first time I met her, and I was a young woman, I guess, or girl of 18, and I lacked confidence in many, many ways. It's funny, I was confident in some ways, but at a core level, I felt lacking in something. And the first time she looked at me with this penetrating gaze. And I didn't know who she was at the time. I knew she was an elder of the Brahma Kumaris coming from India. But she looked at me with this penetrating gaze. And I was one of many students sitting on the floor in the classroom, and she just said, "I know who you are. I know who you are." And it was it was like she'd seen something in me, or she'd seen maybe the real me, this real me, and she would spend the next 35 years pulling this real me out, this powerful soul, this compassionate soul, things that I'm continuing to work on, but that she has cultivated in me, a confidence and a self-respect and a belief in myself, and a deeper, like a really deep, sustaining kind of compassion and vision for the world. And I think she did that. I mean, I think the reason we connected in that way, that was like, I think the core of our connection, is because when she would tell stories of when she was really young, she was very timid. It's extraordinary. She ended up being the leader of a worldwide organization, and I mean, she was a diminutive little, she had this little body, 4'8" or something, and she's been sick since she was 21, so like physically ill. She survived on the blessings of others and on her own spiritual determination. Like, I mean, she was astonishing. This, I don't even want to call her a woman. She was like this entity of love and like fierce compassion. But she would tell these stories of she felt that others were so much better than her. And that she'd come late because she came like in 1937 as opposed to 1936. And I had those feelings. I came in 1984. I thought, oh my God, everyone's so pure and they're so spiritually accomplished, and I've come so late and they've all got something and I'm missing it. So I think she saw that in me, and she, like these spiritual elders that we have in the Brahma Kumaris, they've all become accomplished in their own ways. Dadi Prakashmani was kind of, you get the sense that she, of course, she made spiritual efforts and paid attention and things, but you get the feeling in a way she didn't, because she was so kind of accomplished and fully adorned in this kind of beautiful, amazing person. Dadi Janki, you can tell from the way she was with us, like this finger, the way she spoke to us, her incessant and insistent interest in us and our lives, her persistent love and attention on us, is because she saw in us, often in the Western psyche, the self-sabotage we do sometimes, or this feeling of lack that we have. But she also had the power to see beyond it. She could see into the essence of the soul, so she could see who you were, and like she did with herself, she overcome her limitations, so she knew that we could overcome ours. And that was, I mean, she had many tasks in her life, but that was the task that she that I resonated with. And I mean, there were so many so many times of deep exchanges where we would somehow, our communication was profound, but we didn't speak the same physical language. I would go out of there thinking, what an extraordinary conversation, and thinking, she was speaking Hindi and I was speaking English, but so much of the communication with her was at a soul level because she lived in that soul realm, and because she had a profound intellect of understanding deep spiritual truths, and she had such a heart that would embrace the world. And on the basis of those two qualities, I had moments of incredible communication with her, understanding the depth of surrender, understanding love, every conceivable topic. So, it's funny. I mean, of course, I feel I'll miss her in a way, but only in like a piece of paper, superficial way. Actually, I don't feel a lack of her. I feel she's very alive, and I feel she's given me her spiritual powers as an inheritance, as some kind of gift. I've really felt that since she's passed. And it's just my job to continue the learning. She's continuing to teach. And I'm grateful beyond measure for having her in my life and having her as a teacher and a very dear friend. So, Daddy, love you.
ना ये चांद होगा ना तारे रहेंगे मगर हम हमेशा तुम्हारे रहेंगे ना ये चांद
Awakening to a new way of living.